In this video, we're ranking the level 2 spells from Heroes of Might and Magic 2. This is a continuation of the series, so if you haven't seen the other one, you might get spoiled in this one, so maybe visit that one before moving on. But still, let's go with Blind. Blinded creatures cannot take action until attacked and retaliate with half strength. This costs 6 spell points, the target is an enemy, and the duration is 1 round per spell power. Blind is extremely strong. There's an exception here. There are some units that are immune to blind, like I think the Giants and Titans, immune to mind-affecting spells, which blind would be one of, and also the Necromancer units are immune to blind. Anyway, blind is extremely significant because you can skip one of the enemy units' turn, which is quite significant, and even that half strength retaliation can come in handy sometimes. So this is very useful whenever the enemy has a very huge stack and you don't want to deal with them, or you don't have a reasonable way to damage them very quickly, but they could hit very hard. So if you blind them, then you can try to attack the other units that the enemy has and then come back to the blinded one, right? Of course, blind can be dispelled by Dispel Magic or Cure, but even that's pretty good value because you force the enemy into doing that. Or you can just wait for the enemy to cast a specific spell in that turn and then you blind, right? But that's very situational. So still, blind is quite a strong spell, so I would rank it well. First of all, you've been warned that this might be a spoiler for the level 1 spell, so if you don't want to see this yet, check out the other video. But still, here we go. Blind, I would say, is one of the more significant spells, right? So it's pretty high up there, I would say. Blind has gotten me out of some very difficult situations many times. So I would say blind is quite an A+ level spell. Maybe not quite an S, or I'm not sure. It could be an S as well, but blind is very, very, very significant. Maybe an S-, I would say. Blind can actually be so significant that without it, you would lose a battle. With it, you could win it, you know? So I would keep it at an A+ so far. The next one is Cold Ray. Now, this is not the proper icon, but still, we'll forgive the guy who made this manual back in 1996. But still, Cold Ray inflicts 20x power and cold damage to a single enemy creature. Costs 6 and targets 1 enemy. So, this is quite significant. This is like a double magic arrow, in a sense, right? It's an instant double magic arrow on a singular unit for double the cost, double the damage. So, and also it's cold damage, which might come in handy sometimes because it's considered to be an elemental spell, which means that some units can be immune to it, like the water elemental or something like that. And it deals double damage against fire elemental, which is, you know, very situational, but still. And it can be affected by some artifacts that increase damage dealt by cold related spells or something like that. So anyway, Cold Ray is quite strong. It's the second best damaging spell in the level 2 spells category. So it's a no-brainer, right? And whenever you have Cold Ray, you can damage, you know, quite significantly a stack of units. So it's a very good spell for sure compared to the other ones. How strong is it? Well, Cold Ray, this is the proper icon. Cold Ray is better than Magic Arrow, I would say. I wouldn't say it's better than Blind at all, because Blind, well, here we go. The situation in which Blind makes a lot of sense is that whenever you have a very big stack of units that you don't want to deal with, right? Or who's already attacking you and you just want to get out of that situation, you blind them, then you maybe move away or something like that. So it's pretty good, pretty strong, Blind. Cold Ray instead costs the same amount of mana, but only deals like 20x power, which is, you know, strong somewhat, but it really depends on how much spell power you have, right? So it's not as relevant for barbarians and knights. So these guys, if they don't have too much spell power, well, they will deal, what, 20 damage for 1 spell power? That's not significant. Or even if they have 2 somehow, 40 damage? Well, is it that devastating? No. If you're a warlock, though, yeah, you can deal a lot of damage. But still, blind, anybody can use it. Yeah, okay, based on spell power, it might last longer or not. But you still can have an immediate effect. Even if you have 1 spell power and blind would last only 1 turn, it's still significant because you blind somebody and that chances are that unit is not gonna be able to attack in that turn anyway, because you cast blind in such a way that you skip their turn, right? So at least you have that going for it. So I would say blind is more significant than Cold Ray, for sure. Now, it depends, you know, the spell magic is, it's so difficult to compare all these spells, but I would say that this kind of makes sense. Maybe keeping the spell magic, between them, or something like that, I'm not sure. Spell magic could actually be an S, now that I think about it, right? Because it can nullify all these other effects. Maybe it's actually an S now that I think about it. Maybe put the spell magic at an S, but we might revisit this because in time we'll discover so many more significant spells that even all these at S might be brought a little bit down. You know, we'll see. But I think this makes sense so far, but let me know what you think. The next one is Death Ripple, which inflicts 5x power in death magic to all non-undead creatures. Costs 6 as well. And yeah, the effect is instant, targets all living creatures. This is pretty significant. This only makes sense for the necromancers, right? Or in some situations, if you really want to, you know, accept dealing some damage on yourself just to be able to go forwards. Also, there is a very ridiculous situational, let's say, scenario in which Death Ripple can make sense to be able to wake up somebody who has been blinded on your own side, you know, because Death Ripple deals so little damage that you might accept dealing damage to your own units, because it's not that much, you know, just to wake up the guy, right? If you don't have Dispel Magic or Cure or something like that, what are you gonna do? Well, Death Ripple, your own guys, you know, maybe, but that's very exceptional, you know. But anyway, the thing is that this is like dealing half. I know that it's ridiculous that my point of reference is a magic arrow, but this is half a magic arrow, but spread onto multiple creatures, probably 5, you know, but you could, you know, it depends on the situation, but usually you fight against 5 stacks, right? So that's 25x power in total in damage. So it depends, right? That might be significant if you deal with an enemy camp, let's say, for which the stacks are spread evenly, right? You have 5 stacks of 2 trolls each. That's good. You might go for Death Ripple, but sometimes it makes more sense to concentrate all of that and deal all of the damage onto just one stack of units, like Cold Ray, for example. Cold Ray would be the equivalent of Death Ripple's damage for 4 units, right? So, you know, maybe that would make more sense, but still, Death Ripple is a pretty interesting spell. It makes sense for the necromancers, but sometimes, you know, if you have a more devastating spell like Cold Ray, let's say, maybe you deal with, you know, in general, you would want to deal with the most menacing stack of units as opposed to slightly damaging all of them. But it depends on the situation. But I would say Death Ripple is pretty good. So all things considered, Death Ripple should be maybe kind of at an A level, but yet again, Death Ripple is only relevant for necromancers and in some very exceptional situations. Magic Arrow is relevant all the time, well, for everybody, but in the early game. So, you know, but Cold Ray is more devastating, you know, here we go. How do you even rank this? Death Ripple, better than Magic Arrow? I wouldn't say so. Not really. Not at all. Because it's also only used by one guys. I mean, it's entirely possible to just go for 2 magic arrows in 2 turns as opposed to going for 1 Death Ripple and something else in the second turn. I'm not sure. Maybe just below magic arrow, which sounds kind of crazy to say, but magic arrow is so flexible, so versatile, so good in the early game as well, that I would still rank this higher than Death Ripple. Maybe even Death Ripple, maybe B plus or something like that. It's not that significant, right? And it has some limitations, right? But let me know what you think. Maybe I'm mistaken. The next one is Disrupting Ray. Reduces defense of a target by 3, and the creature can be affected multiple times by this spell. Costs 7, and the target is 1 enemy. The duration is the entire combat, which is quite significant, because that means you can still, you know, you can stack it, you can spam it on a very big stack of units that's very difficult to deal with. So that could be interesting, right? You can reduce, especially for Titans or something like that, maybe Disrupting Ray could make sense. It doesn't matter what spell power you have. It only matters how much knowledge you have, right? So Disrupting Ray can be a good idea even for the factions that don't favor getting spell power too much, right? But maybe they have an artifact that increases their knowledge, and then they keep reducing the defense of some very threatening stack of units. That's significant. -3 for defense would mean, well, it depends on what that difference that I've mentioned, right? The difference between, it's always, the game calculates that difference between attack skill and defense skill, right? And whatever that number would be, you know, if you get, if the attacker would get extra damage or reduced damage. And the extra damage scales faster than the reduced damage. And what I mean by that is that, let's say if the conclusion would be that attack skill is greater than the defense skill of the defender by 2, that means 20% extra damage. However, if it would be the reverse, -2, right, so the defense would be higher, then the damage reduction is not 20%, it's just 10%, right? So it depends, right? If you're already dealing a lot of damage against an enemy, right? Already your attack skill is greater than their defense skill, so you have, let's say, 30% extra damage. Disrupting Ray adds 30% more to that, so it's 60%. That's pretty significant. However, if you're already attacking somebody and you're dealing reduced damage, Disrupting Ray will take some time to gather steam, let's say. Because if you deal, let's say, -25% damage, you cast Disrupting Ray, you go from -25 to -10 only. So there's some difference there. But if you cast Disrupting Ray again, -10, you go to +10. And then yet again, +40, +70. +100, and so on and so forth. Maybe the battle is going to end by that point, but still, you know, it's an interesting consideration for sure. So Disrupting Ray, is it good? Well, the cost is what's the biggest problem here. 7 mana, well, you know, that is so much for most factions, let's say, that even though the duration is the entire combat, and also it's as if you would make everybody else have a bloodlust against that unit. You know, it's kind of the same thing, because their defense is reduced by 3 because of this. So by comparison, you would consider that everybody else has a +3 attack. Kind of, you know, it kind of makes sense. So, well, that being said, Disrupting Ray is not that significant because there are other spells. If you only have Disrupting Ray, it might be very good, but whenever you have Cold Ray at your disposal, or Blind, or some, you know, you can do so many other things than Disrupting Ray that I don't think it sees that much play. I don't use it. My go-to is not casting Disrupting Ray. Very rarely do I do that, unless you just want to go for that extra damage if you already have a lot of attack skill. So for Barbarians, for example, if you already deal a lot of damage, like 100% more damage, and you cast Disrupting Ray on somebody, you get to 130 damage instead, extra. That could be significant, and you can keep spamming that as long as you have knowledge, which is not that much probably for the Barbarian. Or you can do, yeah, well, it depends on the artifacts that you have, right? There are many considerations, but overall I would say that Disrupting Ray is not the best spell out there. It's not, you know, the one thing that becomes a game changer. I don't think so, but it's not bad either. So I would say Disrupting Ray could be at a B+, perhaps better than these other spells, right? Because Disrupting Ray, as I've said, is like it's almost like a mass bloodlust against a specific unit, you know? So it must be better than Bloodlust in a sense, maybe. Well, there are some considerations here based on, you know, the retaliation or something like that, but still, you know, you get what I mean. So, well, is it better than Death Ripple? Yes, for sure. But better than Magic Arrow? Not at all. Not a chance. No way. Still, this one is relevant for the entirety of the game compared to Magic Arrow, but still. Disrupting Ray, I feel like if it would have cost less mana, like 5, or even 4 would be ridiculous, but 5 would have put it easily at an A category, maybe very close to Blind, perhaps. But because it costs 7, there might be more value in casting multiple smaller, let's say, spells in multiple turns than just going for Disrupting Ray. I would rather just bloodlust somebody and then maybe bless them as well, or something like that, as opposed to in 2 turns, as opposed to just disrupting Ray and then going for something else like bless, or I don't know, but maybe a B. Next one is Dragon Slayer. Creature gains +5 to attack skill against dragons. Costs 6, targets an ally, and the duration is 1 round per spell power. Well, this is interesting. You know, it's an interesting idea, but it's not that strong, I would say, because it's too situational. It's only against dragons, which would mean green, red, black dragons, and bone dragons as well. Now, against bone dragons, it's not, you know, I don't think Dragon Slayer is necessary. Against the other dragons, because they're so strong, yeah, you might need all the help you can get. However, is this the help you need? Well, Dragon Slayer, +5 attack skill, yet again, the same consideration. If you already have a lot of attack power, attack skill compared to the dragon's defense skill, and you already deal more damage, then this one would mean adding 50% extra to that. So if you deal 10% extra damage, with Dragon Slayer, you would deal 60% damage extra. So that could be significant. But if you deal reduced damage, well, it's not, you know, you will reduce it a little bit less, right? Or the reduction is going to get lesser, or you can get from damage reduction to damage increase, but I don't know. It could be significant still. It's almost like, yeah, it could be somewhat significant, sure. But +5 is not that high to justify this one because it's so situational. What do I mean? Well, what's the difference between Dragon Slayer and Bloodlust? Dragon Slayer only affects fights against dragons, which means that technically, if you would bloodlust some of your own units, you get +3 attack, right? And a non-dragon entity attacks you, and you retaliate against them, you still have +3 attack against these guys. So that is significant, that's strong. However, Dragon Slayer, you cast Dragon Slayer on somebody, and the same scenario happens, somebody else, a non-dragon attacks you, Dragon Slayer is not going to be useful. So, for that 2 extra attack skill against dragons specifically, can you justify that drawback of not being able to attack anything else with increased attack skill, and also just the 2 extra attack skill compared to Bloodlust? I don't think so. I don't think that makes sense. And even the cost is 6, which is very significant. So, Dragon Slayer is not that strong. It's an interesting idea, I would say. Even lore-wise, you know, the what is it? The Chosen One, the Dragon Slayer, what is it? Saint George, right? Killing the dragon or something like that. Yeah, sure, but it's not the game changer. Maybe you can combine it with Bless and with casting it on Titans who can hold up to dragons as well. Also, well, this is a consideration. You can still stack them, I'm pretty sure. You can cast Dragon Slayer and Bloodlust, or you go for Bloodlust first, then Dragon Slayer. But even though, you know, if the dragons are so much of a threat, you would go for Dragon Slayer first. But you know, again, the consideration that I've said so far. So I would say Dragon Slayer is not strong. Unfortunately, it's lower than Bloodlust for sure. Worse than Cure, worse than Shield. It's too situational. That's the biggest issue that it has, and it costs too much. If it would have been 4 mana, and it would have been like, let's say, plus 2 attack skill, or +1 attack skill to everything else, and then an extra 3 points of attack skill against dragons or something like that, maybe it would have been strong, and keep the mana at 6. Or just find some way to balance these things out. But for 6 mana, I think this is pretty crazy, right? And also it's the opportunity cost. If you cast Dragon Slayer on some unit, well, it depends. What if the enemy casts blind on that unit? What have you done? I don't know, right? Or what if they dispel magic? What if there's so many things that can happen to this, to lose that advantage that I'm not sure. It's so situational, it's ridiculous. So I would say it's kind of like a C tier, very difficult to use, and even if you can use it, I wouldn't say it's that much of a game changer. I don't know. Next one is Haunt. Deflags a mine and sets 4x power ghosts to guarded. Costs 8. It's an adventure type of spell, and it targets 1 mine. Duration until the ghosts are defeated. This is an interesting spell, I must say, right? At first glance, you might think, what a useless thing. It's like view mines or something. It's kind of stupid. But it's not, actually. Because, well, first of all, the normal use would be to just try to deter the enemy from getting a mine that they would desperately need, right? So not deter, but significantly slow them down or bring their army strength down quite significantly, because ghosts are very, very strong, especially based on spell power. 4 times spell power would mean that if you're a basic warlock, let's say, you're level 1 and your spell power is 3, already you create 12 ghosts, which is already a pack. So that is not too easy to deal with in the early stages of the game, in the early game, right? So that can be very strong, for sure. Just to, you're fighting against a warlock, let's say, they need sulfur for sure. You find the nearest sulfur mine that you don't need, really. You haunt it and move on. So yeah, the enemy would have to prepare themselves significantly to be able to deal with ghosts, because that's a difficult battle anyway. But okay, all that is fine and whatever. But there's another thing, another consideration that makes this spell super strong. You know what that is? You can spam it on your own mines near your castle, such that you can gain experience from it. So you convert mana into experience. That is unbelievably strong, actually, because you can level up really quickly based on nothing. You just go at the castle, right? You spend the night at the castle, you generate the maximum amount of spell points, then you prepare your army in such a way that the ghosts won't be able to feed off of your army easily. You go in there with a lot of health points and stuff like that, and maybe with the damaging spells from a distance like Cold Ray. You go in, you attack the enemy ghosts, right? And you generate experience, or even 200 IQ. You use a hero that doesn't have much spell power to haunt a mine, create some ghosts, right? Not too many though. And then you go in, attack the mine with your more stronger hero that has a lot of spell points, and you obliterate them with Cold Ray, and maybe you use some cure every once in a while, right? To not lose units, to not feed the ghosts. Extra free experience that makes a lot of sense in the early game. Afterwards, well, it's not really that much experience that you will gain fighting lots of whatever, but still, this makes it a very interesting spell if you gain experience from it. It costs, there's some preparation that needs to be done, but the effect can be so significant. You can gain so much experience compared to the other factions or the enemies that you might clean them up. Just because, right? Imagine the virgin level 1 barbarian dude that just started playing or getting some resources versus the Chad warlock with level 7 because they farmed with Haunt. That's pretty significant. So Haunt, at first glance seems kind of weak, but it's not. So because of this, Haunt, well, if you actually use it to gain experience, might be one of the strongest spells actually. But if you don't, well, it's not that significant. It's kind of like, well, maybe better than Dragon Slayer or something. But for experience, that can compound, the effect can compound so much that it could be one of the best spells imaginable. Because, having so many more skills than the opponent, right? The primary skills, secondary skills, that is so strong just because you went for the super farming that Haunt can provide. So I would say maybe, I don't know, like an S just for the super ultra experience that you might get. But it's kind of, it's difficult to rank it compared to everything else, right? It's a very different type of spell, but just put it at an S. Yeah, I really think it's very strong. So we've made it halfway through. If you've enjoyed this video so far, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much. Next one is Lightning Bolt, which inflicts 25x power in electricity damage to a single enemy creature. Costs 7, so 1 more compared to Cold Ray, and it targets 1 enemy. Now this is the strongest spell in the level 2 category, for sure, right? It's stronger than Cold Ray. It's as if Death Ripple would be concentrated onto a single projectile onto a single enemy, right? For full stacks, right? Against 5 stacks, right? It's the exact same thing. So this is very significant. A well-placed lightning bolt can be super devastating, right? Especially on ranged units that you don't want to deal with or you can't deal with, you don't have flying units or something like that. You just cast lightning bolt, already you're winning, okay? And the more spell power you have, the more significant it is. Now, for the factions that I like to dog on, of course, many times, barbarians and knights, lightning bolt is not that significant, unfortunately. They will go for something else, of course. But yeah, this one is super devastating, right? And it's significantly better than Cold Ray for not that much extra spell power, okay? So if you would have, let's say, hypothetically, you would have, what, 70 spell points to use, and you only cast lightning bolt, you would deal, what, 250 times spell power and electricity damage. However, with lightning bolt, yeah, you can cast 1 extra lightning bolt, right? You can cast 11 for 66 mana, but 11 lightning bolts would only deal 220 spell power in damage. So already they're still losing, right? So yeah, lightning bolt is super strong. It's still considered kind of a, yeah, this electricity damage means that, you know, against elementals, sometimes it might be super strong, sometimes not. So, that being said, Lightning Bolt is better than Cold Ray. However, the question is it so much better that it goes into the S category or above Blind? I would say that for the same consideration why I put Cold Ray below Blind, I would still let Lightning Bolt in this position as well, between them, because, again, if you don't have spell power, Lightning Bolt is not that effective, but Blind is always effective. So I would still put Blind above these things, right? Based on, you know, what I've presented before. I think that would be the logic, but it depends on how you play. But I would still say that Blind is so much more significant. But Lightning Bolt as a damaging spell in and of itself is the best one in the level 2 category, but Blind is used by more factions, I would say. Anyway, Steel Skin adds +5 to the creature's defense skill for 6 mana, and it targets 1 ally, 1 round per spell power as duration. Well, again, the same consideration. It depends on what that conclusion, that calculation is already. If you already suffer reduced damage, right? So your defensive skill on a creature is greater than the attacker's attack skill, then there's already some damage reduction. Let's give an example, like the difference is 2. The damage reduction is 10%, right? The enemy deals 10% less damage against your unit. Well, if you cast Steel Skin at that point, you go from -10% damage to -35%, which is pretty significant still. However, if the attacker's attack skill is higher than your defender's defense skill already, Steel Skin is even more impactful because, let's give an example. The attacker has 6 points of attack skill more than your defense skill, so their extra damage inflicted upon your unit is 60%. If you cast Steel Skin at that point on that unit, the extra damage goes from 60% to 10%. So 50%, they lose so much, right? So Steel Skin is quite significant in those situations where you're getting attacked by a barbarian that has so many attack skill points. Steel Skin can be ultra significant. But in the early game, Steel Skin might be kind of overkill, you know? Or especially if you are a knight and already there's a significant damage reduction going on, casting Steel Skin for that extra -25% damage reduction might not be the best idea because already you are resisting quite a lot. So you might just go for Stone Skin instead for less mana and then do something else. I'm not sure, right? Steel Skin maybe sometimes could lose against Stone Skin, you know, because +3 is already pretty significant. Do you really need to go for that extra 10% damage reduction or 20% if the attack skill is greater than your defense skill anyway? I'm not sure, right? But Steel Skin is the upgraded version of Stone Skin, so that would mean it should be, in general, higher, but not that higher, you know? Again, it's difficult to compare these things against the damaging spells or something like that, but I would say just above Stone Skin most of the time, probably. But still, it could be very strong, but it depends on who you're fighting against, right? So sometimes it could be even at an A level, right? Or pretty close to negating the effects of a Bless or something like that, because you have so much more damage reduction going on. So it really depends, I can't just rank it based on the best case scenario or something like that. It's just, I would think of it as an average based on my intuition at the time or something like that, but I would say just be in the middle. I'm not sure. It sees probably more play than, I would go below with Death Ripple because only the Necromancers are going to use it. Maybe even below Cure, I would say. Yeah, I think this might make a lot of sense, but yeah. And we get to the spells that are not that significant in this tier. So, Summon Boat, which is kind of a misnomer, but here we go. Summons nearest friendly empty boat to the caster's location. Costs 5, and it's an adventure type of skill or spell. Well, this is very ultra situational, and there's one thing they don't mention here. It's not like, well, first of all, it's not like you can just conjure a boat out of nothing. No, it needs to be an existing boat that you just teleport to your location. So that's already pretty bad. But the thing is that you can't summon any boat that's near or that's at sea. No, you need to summon a boat that you have occupied recently, or for which the most recent occupant was you. What do I mean by that? It means that if the enemy uses a boat and then they get off of it, right? You can't summon that boat. You need to summon one of your boats, which is kind of situational, Maybe sometimes you can go for a strategy like if you're on an island somewhere, you don't have a boat for whatever reason, but you have a shipyard at a castle that has access to the same sea territory or whatever, the sea area. So you buy a boat there, use a hero to occupy it, then go off of it. Now that boat is considered to be yours, and then with the guy on the island, you summon the boat to him. Maybe, man, sure, but it's too situational. I don't know, especially since most maps are not water containing, so already is pretty bad. And there's no, as far as I've seen, there's no actual exception. Like if, in the game code, if this map doesn't contain water, then never generate summon boat. No, bro. Nope. You can still get summon boat easily. And that's a shame. Quite disappointing because of the opportunity cost as well, regardless of where you get the summon boat from. Imagine you build Mage Guild level 2, get summon boat. Well, I can't use it. Pretty bad. Or from one of those buildings that gives you a free spell, and you get summon boat. I could have gotten Lightning Bolt, man, or something else. But yeah, it's pretty bad. So I would just say summon boat is pretty low out there. Maybe sometimes it can be a game changer. Maybe you teleport that to your hero, maybe, and from that point onwards you win the game. I don't know, but it's pretty bad, like really bad, like D-. Maybe. It's so situational, it's so ridiculous. Then we go to View Artifacts. Shows the location of all remaining artifacts on the world view. Costs 2. Again, you can game the system with this one, right? You just cast it, or save the game, cast this, memorize everything, and then you move on. Problem is, unless you know what each icon means, or what each artifact is, or what the effects are, in that map that you generate, right, to see the artifacts, I don't think you get that much information. You can't see it, and this is probably a limitation of the technology at the time, but you can't see, like, well, okay, so this is an icon, okay, let me see what this artifact does. Okay, +2 attack strength. Okay, I can see that. No, you need to have memorized everything, or you have to have the manual open at all times, or some spreadsheet, or something, some cheat sheet. But nah, it's not really significant. And even artifacts, most of the time, they're not that strong. It's very luck dependent. So it depends on what the map generates for you on the map. Sometimes, a lot of the artifacts that you might encounter are not really significant. Like, if, you know, you get your barbarian and you get, oh, I don't know, some artifact that increases the damage dealt by a lightning bolt. What lightning bolt? I'm not going to use it, realistically speaking. Or, you know, Dragon Slayer on a map that, or no, artifact that increases, let's say, or removes the penalty. There's a bow that removes the penalty of ranged units that attack over castle walls. Okay, but, you know, I'm a warlock and I can only use centaurs, maybe. Or if I go for a hybrid approach, maybe I can recruit something else that is a ranged unit, but chances are, no, not really. So, view artifacts, I don't know. Maybe it could make sense just offensively, you know, to try to get the artifacts that the enemy might use more. Just, you know, you get them just so that they won't be able to use them. Like that stupid strategy, like the FAANG companies, right? Facebook, Amazon, you know, Apple, Netflix, and Google. These guys that hire very skilled programmers, right, or IT guys, not because they need them, but because they don't want the other companies, the competitors, to get them. Imagine that, right? But, you know, there's a 200 IQ strategy. I guess it could make sense, right? So, sure, view artifacts maybe sometimes could be significant, but it's still kind of one of those meme skills. Maybe still lower than resources. I don't know if an artifact can be so devastating. I mean, sometimes, but it's kind of rare. Most artifacts are not that useful, I would say. So, because of all the limitations, I would still put it at a D category below the resource ones, because these are still easier to understand and you can use them instantly, as opposed to, you know, artifacts. You need to go there, get one. Maybe it's not relevant for the hero that was nearest, so you need to transfer the artifact. Oh, I don't know. There are so many limitations. I don't like this. And finally, guys, visions. Gives relative strength of an army camp and whether that camp will offer to join the hero. Oh man, the value. 6 mana as well for 1, and targets 1 army camp that's lingering, right? Not an enemy hero or something like that. No, an army camp. Know what the biggest problem is? 1, you can game the system against the AI. You can just, again, save, cast this, load, okay? Or you can just save, attack the camp, see what happens, load, if you don't like it. So, you know, it only makes sense for, you know, against a human, yet again. Against a human, visions, if you have a lot of knowledge, yeah, it could be good, right? You cast visions all the time against random camps just to know if they can join you or not. And if they will, you can change your strategy significantly based on that, right? You can have sometimes, you know, lots of archers somewhere, right? You cast visions and you know for sure they will join your army. Well, that's pretty significant because most of the time maybe you wouldn't have gone for that battle anyway, right? You would have avoided it. So that could be significant against a human. Yet again, how many times are you playing against a human in Heroes 2? Well, realistically, how many times are you playing Heroes 2 anyway? You know, visions. Not the greatest skill. I would be upset if I would get visions in a mission, right? Even in that Heroes 2 series that I've started on the channel, in the first mission, I got visions out of one of those buildings that gives you a free spell. Very, very disappointing to get visions. That being said, it's one of the better bad skills. Yeah, so better than these chumps right here, but better than these guys with resources. Probably not, because resources will be very significant. With the lingering resources, you can build some buildings way faster, so you can get the benefit from that quicker, which is quite significant, and mines are very strong. So visions, it's like, you know, sometimes you can get like a pseudo quasi diplomacy in a sense, because you would know beforehand if somebody would join you or not. So that could be significant to increase your army strength, and then from that point onwards you start winning more. Okay, maybe you can make the argument for that, but I would still, well, put it here between them, just so everybody would be upset, right? I think that's the compromise. So anyway, guys, this has been it for this tier list. Join me next time for the level 3 spells, and also, if you're interested, if you have anything to add, or if you think that I've made a mistake, please let me know in the comments. Okay, guys, I'll see you next time.